On the evening of the 30th of November 1861, 24-year-old carpenter David Cumming was drinking in the Gillen's bar in Inverness. At closing time he said farewell to his friends and he headed home to his parents' house in Shore Street, but he never arrived. Davy's body was found early the next morning by Mrs. Fraser of 27 Rose Street. She'd gone to her garden around 7 a.m. to investigate a disturbing groaning sound. She shrieked in horror upon the discovery of the barely alive and bloodied body of Davy. When her cries for help went unanswered, she dragged his poor body into her house. He passed away shortly after. A large gash on the side of his head was the likely culprit. Shockingly, Davy had been stripped naked apart from a solitary boot and a pair of socks. It didn't take long for the local police to be called, and they quickly discovered a bloody trail and set of footprints which led them to the garden of 35 Rose Street. All evidence pointed to Davy being beaten to death with a hammer before being dragged across to poor Mrs. Fraser's house, where he eventually succumbed to his injuries. While searching the cabbage patch of 35, the police found Davy's remaining wages, a watch and a necktie that he had just treated himself to. Upon further questioning and probing, the police were also able to retrieve Davy's bloodied and soiled clothes from a locked shed at number 35. The house was occupied by local stonemason Nicol Ferguson, his wife Catherine, and his two daughters Elizabeth and Catherine. On the night of their murder, their oldest daughter Isabella was also in the house. Originally, the whole family were arrested. However, based on testimony of the neighbours, only one faced trial. The voice that was heard begging forgiveness in the early hours was the voice of Isabella. The trial began the following May with 22-year-old Isabella the sole defendant. A huge number of witnesses were called to the stand by the defence as they attempted to paint the picture of a drunk and disorderly Davy. The testimony of witnesses, including Helen Gillen of the Gillen's bar, reported that Davy was very drunk that evening. Shockingly, this information led to Isabella receiving a very lenient sentence. The court decided that they couldn't prove whether the blow to the head or exposure to the cold, exasperated by Davy's drunken state, was responsible for the young man's death. Isabella admitted striking Davy over the head and pled guilty to a lesser charge of aggravated assault. She received a meagre 18 months in prison. The short sentence that Isabella received didn't come close to atoning for the death of Davy, a fact that wasn't lost on his friends and colleagues at the time. They were angry at the injustice and wanted to make sure that no one ever forgot the brutal nature of his untimely death. As a result, they erected a unique gravestone in the chapel yard to remind Inverness of what happened on that awful night. The inscription reads, "To the memory of David Cumming, house carpenter, Inverness, aged 24 years, who was found dead in Rose Street, Inverness, on the morning of the 1st of December 1861, in circumstances to excite suspicion that death had been caused by violence." Next to Davy's grave you will find the graves of his parents, with his mother passing within a year of the murder. Having lost 3 children in her lifetime, it is no doubt that she probably died of a broken heart. This story was brought to you by Highland Paranormal, the North of Scotland's longest running paranormal group. For more information on investigations, events, walks and talks, please check out www.highlandparanormal.org. Thanks for listening.